Every December, as the frost settles over the sprawling Norfolk countryside, the world's attention turns to a quiet, red brick estate called Sandringham. For decades, the global media has closely documented the royal family's Christmas morning walk to the small, 16th-century church of St. Mary Magdalene. Even now, in the years following the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, royal watchers meticulously analyze every detail of the holiday gathering, from the carefully curated guest list to the subtle shifts in body language, and perhaps most intensely, the fashion. But if we observe the modern appearances of Queen Camilla or Catherine, Princess of Wales, we realize that the public is often searching for something far more specific than mere seasonal trends. They are scanning the winter coats and tailored collars for the familiar gleam of a pearl drop earring or the distinct, diamond-encrusted shape of a vintage brooch. They are looking, quite simply, for the enduring echoes of the late Queen. Stepping beyond the immediate spectacle of the modern royal Christmas, we uncover a fascinating paradox that defined the late monarch's holiday wardrobe for over 70 years. Deep beneath the bustling streets of London lies the Royal Vault, a subterranean fortress housing the most staggering collection of precious stones on the planet. We are talking about the sovereign's scepter with cross, which holds the Great Star of Africa, a diamond so massive and flawless, it defied belief when it was first pulled from the earth. We are talking about tiaras woven from hundreds of brilliant cut diamonds, glittering with the weight of bygone empires, and necklaces dripping with sapphires the size of birds' eggs. It is a collection valued not just in hundreds of millions of pounds, but in the blood, triumph, and history of an entire nation. Yet, during the Christmas holidays, the most televised, deeply personal, and arguably the most important family gathering of the royal calendar, the late Queen almost never wore the grandest pieces from her legendary vault. When the eyes of the entire world were fixed upon her, the monarch consistently chose remarkable restraint. Instead of a blinding diamond collar that could command a room from 50 paces, she wore a familiar, modest string of pearls. Instead of a majestic tiara signaling her divine right to rule, we saw a relatively small, singular brooch pinned neatly to her brightly colored winter coat. Why would a sovereign who possessed the keys to the most spectacular jewels in human history choose to wear something so visually quiet on the very day her family and her people gathered to watch her? The answer lies in the unique, often isolating reality of wearing the crown. To sit on the throne is to exist within a rigid, gilded framework of constitutional expectations. Every word spoken in public by the monarch must be meticulously weighed, measured, and stripped of personal bias. The Queen could not give a political opinion. She could not publicly favor one side of a societal argument over another. She could not freely express personal sorrow, frustration, or even overwhelming joy without it being analyzed by Parliament and the press as a formal state declaration. Her spoken language was strictly bound by diplomacy, tradition, and an unwavering sense of duty. When her words were confined by the heavy chains of her role, she found another way to speak. She mastered a brilliant, unspoken language. She used her jewelry box not as a collection of decorative accessories, but as a silent, incredibly powerful voice. Each piece of jewelry she selected for the Sandringham Christmas gathering was a carefully constructed sentence. To the untrained eye, a pearl is just a pearl, and a sapphire is simply a blue stone reflecting the winter light. But within the walls of the royal estate, and broadcasted to millions of living rooms around the globe, these choices carried the weight of profound messages. They were quiet signals sent across the dining table to her family, subtle reassurances offered to a watching public, and sometimes deeply personal whispers directed to those who had already passed away. The sparkling tiaras of state banquets were designed to project the intimidating, untouchable power of the institution, but the modest brooches of December were chosen to reveal the soul of the woman wearing them. Consider the physical and psychological journey from London to Norfolk. When the Queen boarded the public train to King's Lynn each December, she was actively leaving the heavy machinery of the state behind. The grand palaces of the capital are built for show, for ceremony, for the overwhelming display of royal authority. Their vast gilded ceilings and crimson carpets demand a certain type of towering, diamond-clad majesty. But Sandringham is fundamentally different. Purchased by King Edward VII in 1862, it is a private country home, a beloved retreat surrounded by the freezing winds of the Wash, dark pine forests, and vast agricultural lands. It is here, stepping off the train and driving through the wrought iron gates, that the monarch transitioned from the supreme head of state to the matriarch of a family. Just as her environment changed from marble halls to wooden drawing rooms, her visual language had to adapt. To wear a priceless, dripping diamond riviere to a morning church service in the freezing English countryside would not just be highly impractical, it would be profoundly out of touch. The British people did not tune in on Christmas morning to be intimidated by unfathomable wealth. They tuned in to find comfort in a familiar, steady presence. The moderation in her jewellery was a deliberate act of supreme emotional intelligence. By choosing a 3-strand pearl necklace or a historic, understated brooch, she consciously closed the vast distance between the throne and the public. She transformed herself from a distant ruler into a recognizable, comforting figure. But this restraint was never a lack of power. The quietest messages are often the ones that resonate the longest. The pieces she wore during the festive period were steeped in personal history. They were childhood gifts from her beloved father, tokens of romantic devotion from her husband, and heirlooms passed down from queens who had long since faded into the pages of history books. When she pinned one of these items to her coat, she was not just accessorizing an outfit to match her handbag. She was physically carrying her ancestors, her loved ones, and her memories with her into the present day. Her jewelry box was an emotional archive, and every December, the world waited with bated breath to see which chapter she would choose to open. When the clock strikes exactly 3 on Christmas Day, a familiar hush falls over millions of households across the United Kingdom and the broader Commonwealth. For decades, this exact hour marked a tradition as deeply woven into the fabric of the season as the winter frost itself. The television screen would flicker, revealing a quiet, elegantly appointed drawing room. The antique desk would be immaculate, save for a carefully selected framed photograph or two. And there, sitting with perfect, practiced posture, was Queen Elizabeth II. This was the one moment in the calendar year when she spoke directly to the public, drafting her own thoughts without the filter of government ministers or parliamentary speechwriters. Yet, even in this highly anticipated address, she remained bound by the immense discipline of the crown. She could not use her platform to lament or to pour out her personal sorrows. Instead, she let her choice of jewelry do the heavy emotional lifting. Nowhere was this phenomenon more profoundly visible than during the Christmas broadcast of 2021. It was a year that carried a heavy, quiet shadow over the nation and the palace. For the first time in over 7 decades, the Queen was celebrating the festive season without Prince Philip, her lifelong companion and her strength and stay, who had passed away earlier that spring. The world watched closely, wondering how a woman who had just lost the love of her life would address a global audience in the midst of her first holiday season alone. True to her unbreakable vow of duty, her voice remained remarkably steady, her composure flawless. She did not break down. She did not weep before the recording cameras. But pinned against the vivid crimson fabric of her dress was a subtle, heartbreaking confession, the Sapphire Chrysanthemum brooch. To understand the weight of this specific piece is to understand a love story that spanned a lifetime. She had worn this very same sapphire and diamond brooch in 1947, during a photo call on her honeymoon at the Broadlands estate in Hampshire, standing as a radiant, optimistic young princess, looking up at her dashing naval officer. 60 years later, in 2007, she wore it once again to recreate that exact photograph for their diamond wedding anniversary, their smiles softer, but their bond undeniably stronger. By choosing to wear it on that solitary Christmas of 2021, the brooch transformed from a beautiful antique into an emotional anchor. In a reality where a monarch's tears are deemed a matter of state, that glittering blue sapphire became her unshed tear. It was her silent, dignified way of saying goodbye to her husband, allowing her to fulfill her sovereign duty while holding the memory of him literally close to her heart. The language of royal jewelry, however, extends far beyond the quiet intimacy of the drawing room broadcast. It steps out into the crisp, biting air of Christmas morning. The walk from the main Sandringham house to the small church of Street, Mary Magdalene, is a cornerstone of the royal holiday. It is a highly choreographed public parade, a rare moment for the entire extended family to smile at well-wishers, accept floral bouquets, and demonstrate their enduring unity. Over the years, the public grew accustomed to seeing the Queen in an array of vibrant, cheerful coats: fuchsia pink, neon green, lemon yellow, and rich violet colors chosen specifically so her small frame could be easily spotted by the crowds, waiting hours in the freezing cold. Yet, no matter how striking or modern the outerwear, if you looked at her neckline, you would always find a comforting, unchanging constant: her signature 3-strand pearl necklace. This necklace was not pulled randomly from the grand state vaults alongside the crowns of antiquity. It was deeply, intimately her own, and its origins reveal a fascinating royal tradition. The custom of royals wearing pearls dates back to the Hanoverian era, but it was Queen Victoria who cemented the tradition of giving her female descendants a single pearl every year upon their birthday, so that by the time they reached adulthood, they would have a complete string. Queen Elizabeth's relationship with pearls began when she was just a young girl, receiving her first fine chain as a silver jubilee gift from her stern but loving grandfather, King George V, in 1935. Her father, King George VI, later added to her collection, presenting her with a delicate platinum chain to which he added 2 pearls every birthday. The Queen eventually owned at least 3 nearly identical multi-strand pearl necklaces, rotating them carefully to preserve their delicate organic luster and prevent the silk threads from stretching. While diamonds demand attention with their blinding flashes of light and aggressive sparkle, pearls operate on an entirely different visual frequency. They do not shout, they glow with a warm, steady, and quiet grace. By wearing these exact same pearls year after year, decade after decade, through shifting political climates and cultural revolutions, she was sending a powerful message of unwavering stability. It was her way of visually telling a rapidly changing world that despite political upheavals, economic crises, and the relentless march of time, the commitment of the crown remained as constant and unbroken as the perfect string of pearls resting against her collar. Yet, there is a fascinating, almost theatrical duality to the royal Christmas. While the morning church service is a flawless display of duty and public presentation, the events that take place behind the heavy oak doors of Sandringham on Christmas Eve reveal a completely different side of the monarchy. Following a tradition rooted deeply in their German ancestry, brought over and popularized by Prince Albert in the 19th century, the royal family gathers to open their presents on the evening of December 24th. Trestle tables are laid out in the red drawing room, covered with crisp white linen, with sections marked off by tape for each family member's gifts. You might imagine a scene of unimaginable luxury, with emerald parias, solid gold timepieces, and ruby rings being exchanged under a towering Norfolk fir tree. The reality, however, is beautifully ordinary, almost delightfully absurd. In a deliberate escape from the staggering wealth they are surrounded by all year round, the unspoken family rule is to exchange cheap, humorous novelty items. It is here, away from the telephoto lenses and the crushing public expectations, that the sparkling diamonds take a decisive step back. The same woman who routinely wore the imperial state crown, a masterpiece containing over 2,000 diamonds, including the massive Cullinan II, was known to burst into roaring laughter upon receiving a singing toy hamster, a flashing pepper mill, or a shower cap printed with a cheeky, unprintable slogan. At the holiday dinner table, the grand tiaras of state banquets are entirely absent, replaced instead by flimsy, brightly colored paper hats pulled from traditional Christmas crackers. This striking contrast between the velvet-lined vaults and the paper hats reveals a deeply human longing. The jewels of state are magnificent, but they are incredibly heavy, both physically and symbolically. The imperial state crown alone weighs over a kilogram, often requiring the monarch to keep their neck perfectly stiff to avoid injury. These jewels represent a duty that cannot be paused, a legacy that demands absolute submission of the individual to the institution. The paper crown, the cheap plastic toys, and the laughter in the private drawing room represent the exact opposite. They usher in a specific dress code used privately at the estate known internally as Scruff order. Once the formal church services and the highly structured public appearances are concluded, the stiff, brightly colored coats are hung up. The formal Windsor coats with their red lapels are set aside. The family changes into comfortable tweeds, open-necked shirts, and thick wool jumpers. And crucially, the heavy, historic brooches and the famous three-strand pearls are carefully unclasped and placed back into their leather traveling boxes. Imagine the profound, tactile relief of that moment. For the entire year, the monarch and the senior royal women physically carry the weight of the institution on their shoulders, their necks, and their ears. The diamonds are cold against the skin. The tiaras require hair to be aggressively pinned. When the royal women take off these pieces on Christmas Eve to sit by a roaring fire, to play fiercely competitive games of charades, and to watch a film together in the estate's private cinema, they are physically shedding the armor of their titles. The paper crowns from the crackers are so beloved precisely because they weigh absolutely nothing. They have no historical legacy. They carry no diplomatic expectations. They cannot be inherited. They cannot be evaluated by auction houses, and they will never be placed behind bulletproof glass in a museum. They are fragile, temporary, and entirely ordinary, everything the crown is not. The true joy of the Sandringham Christmas is the rare, fleeting luxury of being ordinary, if only for a single winter evening. But the evening must inevitably end. The paper crowns are swept away by the household staff, and the velvet boxes must eventually be reopened for the next public duty. This unspoken language of jewellery was not reserved solely for mourning Prince Philip or projecting stability through pearls. It was a highly sophisticated diplomatic tool, used continuously throughout the late Queen's reign to navigate times of national and personal trial. If we rewind the historical tapes and observe her Christmas broadcasts through the decades, a fascinating pattern emerges. The jewellery box was never static. It was a living, breathing response to the shifting tides of her era. Consider the broadcast of 1992. It was the year the Queen herself famously dubbed her Annus Horribilis, a terrible, heartbreaking year marked by the marital separations of 3 of her children, relentless tabloid scandals, and a devastating fire that ripped through the historic heart of Windsor Castle. The monarchy was under intense public scrutiny, and the national mood was highly critical. When the Queen appeared on television that December, she did not wear a piece of triumphant, oversized jewellery that would scream of tone-deaf wealth. Instead, she chose the understated, highly elegant pearl trefoil brooch. Featuring a central diamond surrounded by 3 large pearls in a clover-like design, it is a piece that speaks of tradition, quiet endurance, and grounded modesty. By pairing it with a somber, dark forest green dress, her visual message was unmistakable. She was acknowledging the severe gravity of the year, asking for the nation's understanding, and projecting a sense of calm resilience. She was not presenting herself as the untouchable sovereign that day. She was a weary but determined matriarch who had weathered a brutal storm, anchored by the modest pearls that had always defined her public image. Similarly, we can look at the broadcast of 1997, delivered just months after the tragic, world-stopping death of Diana, Princess of Wales. The nation was still wrapped in a heavy blanket of collective grief, and the royal family had faced unprecedented, fierce criticism for their initial stoicism and retreat to the Scottish Highlands. For this incredibly delicate Christmas address, the Queen wore a remarkably simple, unostentatious outfit, relying only on her signature pearls and a minimal, almost invisible brooch. The stark lack of extravagant sparkle was a highly deliberate choice. It was a visual lowering of the royal guard, a gesture of deep respect to a mourning nation, and an acknowledgement that the traditional, glittering pomp of the monarchy had to take a respectful step back in the face of profound human tragedy. In times of celebration, however, the jewellery box would sing an entirely different, joyful tune. During the Christmas broadcast of 2012, marking her spectacular Diamond Jubilee year, she wore the magnificent Cullinan 5-heart brooch. The history of this specific diamond is legendary. Discovered in a South African mine in 1905, the original Cullinan was a rough diamond the size of a human heart, weighing an astonishing 3,106 carats. It was sent to England via regular parcel post to deter thieves, while a decoy was transported on a heavily guarded ship. It was eventually entrusted to the legendary Asker brothers of Amsterdam to be cleaved. The story goes that Joseph Asher studied the stone for months, and upon finally striking the blade and successfully splitting the diamond, he fainted from the sheer stress. The Cullinan 5 is an 18.8-carat heart-shaped stone cut from that legendary rough, set into a delicate platinum web. By wearing this exact piece to conclude her Jubilee year, it was a quiet, sparkling triumph. Without uttering a single boastful word, the brooch reminded the world of the enduring strength, the monumental historical weight, and the unparalleled legacy of the British Crown over 60 years. It was a celebration of survival and longevity, captured perfectly in the flawless depths of a single, invincible diamond. To fully grasp the deliberate nature of this unspoken language, we must step into the private, heavily guarded corridors of Buckingham Palace in the weeks leading up to the holiday. The selection of the Sandringham jewellery was never a last-minute, casual decision made in front of a dressing table mirror on Christmas morning. It was a meticulous choreography of history, memory, and strategy. Long before the royal train departed for Norfolk, the late Queen and her most trusted senior dresser and confidant, Angela Kelly, would sit together in the private quarters. Velvet-lined trays would be brought up from the subterranean vaults by armed guards. Here, the monarch did not simply choose what matched the hue of her tailored winter coats. She actively curated a specific emotional vocabulary for the season. The pieces selected for the Christmas retreat were carefully logged, polished, and placed into custom-made leather boxes, traveling alongside the monarch under heavy security. They were classified as physical assets of the state, yet they were being deployed for an entirely emotional, deeply human purpose. During this private selection process, certain pieces were chosen specifically to invoke the presence of those who could no longer sit at the Sandringham dining table. Consider the breathtaking Courtauld Thompson's scallop shell brooch. Featuring a brilliant diamond shell design with a single, perfect pearl dropping from its center like a bead of water, this piece was designed in 1919 and was famously beloved by the Queen Mother. She wore it constantly throughout her life, including on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, to celebrate her milestone 100th birthday. When the Queen Mother passed away in 2002, she left the treasured brooch to her daughter. In the years that followed, Queen Elizabeth II would deliberately choose to wear this specific shell brooch for her Christmas appearances. To the general public watching the news coverage, it was simply a magnificent piece of vintage jewellery catching the light of the camera lens. But within the walls of the royal household, it was a deeply intimate gesture. The holidays are universally a time when the absence of a loved one is felt most acutely, and the royal family is no exception to the pangs of grief. By wearing the scallop shell brooch, the Queen was ensuring that her mother's memory was visually present during the most important family gathering of the year. It was a daughter's quiet, glittering tribute, worn right above her heart, allowing her to mourn and remember in plain sight without ever breaking her stoic royal composure. There is another jewel that occasionally made its way to the winter retreat, carrying an even heavier, older historical resonance: the Prince Albert brooch. This is an enormous, deep blue sapphire surrounded by a halo of 12 large diamonds set in gold. It was given by Prince Albert to Queen Victoria on the eve of their wedding in 1840. Victoria cherished it so deeply that she pinned it to her wedding dress, noting in her diary how beautiful she found it. She later designated it an official heirloom of the crown, meaning it must never be sold or given away, but passed directly from reigning monarch to reigning monarch. When Queen Elizabeth wore the Prince Albert brooch during the festive season, she was doing something far more complex than wearing a pretty antique. She was summoning the very origins of the modern royal Christmas. It was, after all, Prince Albert and Queen Victoria who popularized the indoor, decorated Christmas tree and established the family-centric holiday traditions that the British public, and indeed much of the Western world, still follows today. By wearing Albert's sapphire, the Queen connected the 20th and 21st century monarchy directly to its 19th century golden age. It was a silent broadcast of ultimate continuity, a reminder that the traditions being celebrated at Sandringham were deeply rooted in the bedrock of the British royal lineage. As we observe the modern royal family navigating the complexities of the mid-2020s, this quiet dialogue of the jewellery box continues seamlessly. We have entered a new era under King Charles III. Recent years, particularly through the Christmases of 2024 and 2025, have introduced a more streamlined, focused monarchy. The institution has been severely tested by unexpected health challenges facing the King and the Princess of Wales, and marked by the familiar, lingering absences of certain family members who have stepped away from royal duties entirely. The holiday table is a little quieter, the guest list carefully curated to reflect the working core of the family. Yet, even in these changing times, the silent language of jewellery continues to speak loud and clear, acting as a vital bridge between the past and the present. King Charles III, Queen Camilla, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, are currently writing their own chapters into this glittering archive. They face a world that moves faster than ever before, a digital age where every movement, every glance, and every hemline is dissected globally on social media within seconds. In such a loud, relentless environment, the silent, slow, and ancient language of precious stones becomes even more vital as a tool of communication. When Queen Camilla stepped out into the biting Norfolk air in recent years, observers noted her wearing the late Queen's Williamson diamond brooch, a breathtaking piece featuring a staggeringly rare pink diamond found in Tanzania, or her favoured pearl and diamond clasps. Queen Camilla's use of these specific heritage pieces is a masterclass in visual diplomacy. She is a woman who entered the royal family under historically challenging circumstances, yet by wearing the late monarch's beloved jewels, she silently projects continuity and stability. It is a gesture of deep respect to her mother-in-law and a quiet reassurance to the public that the traditions of the past are safe in her hands. Even more striking is the approach of Catherine, Princess of Wales. As the future Queen Consort, every accessory she chooses is analysed by millions. Following a challenging year of health concerns, her appearances at recent Christmas gatherings were highly anticipated. When she arrived at St. Mary Magdalene, she looked radiant, but it was her choice of earrings that told the true story. She often reaches for the Bahrain pearl drop earrings, which were crafted from a cache of large, natural pearls gifted to Queen Elizabeth for her wedding in 1947 by the Hakim of Bahrain. By wearing these specific pearls, Catherine is doing exactly what the late Queen did for 70 years. She is bridging the gap between the monumental, intimidating history of the crown and the relatable warmth of a modern family. The pearls offer a soft, comforting glow, a visual shorthand for healing, stability, and quiet strength. Catherine does not need to speak to the press about her resilience or the state of the monarchy. The pearls, carrying the blessing and the legacy of the previous sovereign, speak eloquently for her. They signal that the future of the monarchy is secure, grounded in the exact same values that guided Queen Elizabeth II through her darkest winters. This is the hidden poetry of the Sandringham Christmases. The grand state banquets at Buckingham Palace will always require the heavy, blinding tiaras and the velvet robes to project the hard power of the United Kingdom to visiting dignitaries. But Sandringham is the sanctuary. It is the place where the velvet ropes are unhooked. The state crowns are left safely locked in London, and the royal family relies on the smaller, more intimate pieces to communicate their humanity to the world. The winter snows of Norfolk have witnessed generations of royals walking the exact same path, wrapped in thick coats, smiling at the same crowds. The faces change, the voices change, the eras slowly turn the pages of history. But the language of the jewellery remains beautifully, resolutely intact. As we reflect on this intricate tradition, we are left with a fascinating realization about the nature of power, the relentless passage of time, and human fragility. The great humbling paradox of the royal vault is that the women who wear these spectacular pieces do not truly own them. The Cullinan diamonds, the deep blue sapphires, the perfectly matched organic pearls, these elements were forged in the dark, crushing depths of the earth millions of years ago. They were pulled from the soil, cut by master craftsmen whose names have long been forgotten, and set into gold and platinum. They have survived world wars, the fall of massive empires, the changing of borders, and the passing of countless human generations. A king or a queen is merely a temporary resident in the long, silent life of a precious stone. They are born, they inherit the heavy, sometimes crushing burden of the crown. They do their best to guide their people through the turbulence of their specific era. They grow old, and eventually, they must leave the grand stage of history. But the stones remain. They do not age. They do not fade. They will sit in the quiet, velvet-lined darkness of the royal vault, waiting patiently for the next generation to call upon them to deliver a message. The late Queen Elizabeth II understood this dynamic better than anyone in modern history. She knew she was a custodian of history, bound by the rules of an ancient institution, but her true brilliance lay in how she used that cold, ancient permanence to express the warmest, most fragile aspects of the human experience. She borrowed the immortality of the earth's rarest gems to say, "I miss you" to a lost husband, to say, "I remember you" to a departed mother, and to say, "I am still here for you" to a watching nation that looked to her for comfort. As the winter winds continue to sweep across the Norfolk countryside, the tradition of the Sandringham Christmas remains a fixture of the British calendar. The faces greeting the public on Christmas morning will inevitably change as the decades roll forward, just as they have throughout the centuries. Yet, the unspoken language of the royal jewellery box will endure. It stands as a brilliant, silent testament to a family that has learned to navigate the crushing weight of history, finding a way to whisper their most personal truths through the timeless, indestructible light of a diamond. The next time the festive season rolls around, and you see the royal family stepping out into the crisp December air, I invite you to look a little closer. Look past the bright winter coats, the polite waves, and the highly choreographed smiles. Focus on the stones resting against their lapels, the pearls glowing at their necklines, or the vintage earrings catching the pale winter sun. Listen to the quiet, brilliant stories they are telling. In a world that is constantly loud, where every gesture is scrutinized and every word is fiercely debated, there is something remarkably beautiful about a family that has learned to speak entirely in light, memory, and silence.